if I was creating a brand, if I had a client wanting to create a brand and they didn't have any vineyards or whatever, California, I would say, let's go out. You want to make a blend of, let's say we do a blend of Cabernet and Syrah, which I happen to love as a blend. Let's find some wine from here and from there, and let's buy a ton of this and a ton of that, or 3 tons of this. And that is how The Prisoner was invented. Dave Finney, the genius behind The Prisoner, which is one of the great brands, and let's not forget, was sold for $40 million to one person, to one company, the Herneas family. Everyone laughed at them. Everyone said, you could buy 20 chateaus in Bordeaux for that. They bought it for $40 million. They increased production, and they sold it to Constellation for $247 million with no land.
Welcome to the Wine Podcast. I'm Suzanne Mustacich, your host. Today, my guest is Robert Joseph. He is the wine thinker. He's a former wine critic. He's a journalist. He's a prolific author. He's a very successful consultant. He consults with large and small companies wanting to create either a new blend or a new brand. And he's also created some very successful wines of his own. These are 2 of them right here, all without owning a vineyard. How does he do it? Let's find out. Now, the question is, say, okay, you don't own a vineyard, but how do you source the wine? What are the options if you want to create a wine for finding those grapes?
So let's go back. I believe in terroir. I lived in Burgundy in the Haute-Côte a long time ago. So I absolutely believe in the difference in grapes from different vineyards. Okay. But I also am a realist, and I've seen land. You look at Bordeaux land values. Between 1991 and now, the value of Bordeaux Rouge land has gone up by 30% over that period. I mean, inflation is worse than that, if you like. A Sauterne is worth, I think, it's gone down by about 90%. But basically, there are not many people in many regions whose land value has gone up unless they're in Pauillac. Or then Von Romanet, or they're in Napa. So if you're in the right place, and I always talk about land values as being like the Monopoly board. If you get the dark blue ones, okay, you're great. Yeah. But if you're in the pale blue, the brown ones, your land value is not going to go up, and you're going to struggle to get the money you want. So essentially, as far as I'm concerned, I've never had the money to buy the dark blue. Yeah. So what I want to do is to work with people who own land, ideally, but not necessarily own enough of it for a project to work. So in Languedoc, we're working with a cooperative with 1,000, 1,200 members, 6,000 hectares of lands at altitudes that go from 50 meters to 300 plus. With lots of different grapes. So from the get-go, we were talking to those people about, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Georgia, 1,600 hectares, not in one place, which is where we are in France, across the country, in the east, the west, and high up. And in both cases, I want to have a palette to work with. One of my favorite wines in the world is Grange, Penfolds Grange. And I was lucky enough to talk to Max Schubert, the man who invented it, and the subsequent winemakers. And they have 100 different color palettes. It's like an orchestra. You're arranging, and you say, actually, I just need a little bit of oboe there, a little of this. So number one, as far as I'm concerned, whilst I love the idea of making Pinot Noir from one tiny vineyard, that's not where I am at the moment. So number one. And number two, crucially, and we underestimate this, having a winemaker who's not only a great winemaker, but who is imaginative. Who actually is going to say, well, can we try this? Can we try that? Or when I say, can we try this? Can we try that? They'll say, yeah, let's try it. And a lot of these ideas fail. But essentially, if you don't try, you don't know.
Okay. What about buying bulk wine or a custom crush?
It's something I haven't done, but it's something I don't have a problem with at all. And it's interesting, the difference between the view of bulk wine in Europe to the view in California. Because in California, this is the thing that happens a lot, which it would be illegal in Bordeaux, I think, where one Napa winery with a bit too much Merlot will put their Merlot on the market, and they'll buy some Cabernet from somewhere else. That is unthinkable in Bordeaux. So completely different way of thinking of it. And also in America, we have people who make a living out of growing grapes. That is what they do. We have them in Europe, but in Europe, they're little members of cooperatives with basically 5 acres or less, maybe half an acre or whatever.
Yeah.
So in Europe, we have cooperatives that make bulk wine. And the people we work with in Languedoc, Jean Dalibert, they have tanks and tanks and tanks of bulk wine. And to be honest, so our model from the beginning, so since we don't own any land, what we do own, we own the brand and we own the distribution. We're actually selling the brand to the winery after the 20 years. But at the moment, up until now, we own the brand. So we have created this name, this label, everything about it. And then we go there and we say, hey, we want to make a blend of this and this and this. We spent a day there working on it, and several days. We involve our customers. We bring them into the winery. They taste with us and they say, actually, we want a fresher Sauvignon this year, or this or that. And then we reserve that wine. That wine is reserved in tanks. We sell this wine at a price, even though it doesn't have an appellation, we sell it at a higher price than the AOP Minervois from the same region, from the neighboring vineyards. And we say, right, we're going to have X tanks of this and Y tanks of that we reserve from the latest harvest. If it goes wrong, if we have tariffs or something go on, the winery then ends up with the problem. It's not our problem. On the other hand, over 20 years, they haven't had those problems too often, and they can then use that wine in another blend for somebody else.
One of the other labels.
In the case of bulk wine, that may end up in a supermarket label somewhere as something else. Right. So very different model. And if I was creating a brand, if I had a client wanting to create a brand and they didn't have any vineyards or whatever, California, I would say, let's go out. You want to make a blend of, let's say we do a blend of Cabernet and Syrah, which I happen to love as a blend. Let's find some wine from here and from there, and let's buy a ton of this and a ton of that, or 3 tons of this. And that is how The Prisoner was invented. Dave Finney, the genius behind The Prisoner, which is one of the great brands, and let's not forget, was sold for $40 million to one person, to one company, the Herneas family. Everyone laughed at them. Everyone said, you could buy 20 chateaux in Bordeaux for that. They bought it for $40 million. They increased production, and they sold it to Constellation for $247 million with no land. So if somebody said to me, I want to create a brand, I would say, let's go and buy grapes from here. In Europe, we couldn't do that very easily, or it'd be much tougher. We would be buying bulk wine. But there is really good bulk wine. I go to the bulk wine show every year, and I'm absolutely dazzled by some of the quality of the bulk wine. And it is worth saying that you can buy Châteauneuf-du-Pape in bulk. You can buy Chablis in bulk. And you can definitely buy Bordeaux in bulk, but not generally Pauillac. But then there's a cooperative in Pauillac, La Rose Pauillac. You could buy some of that.
Yep. Okay, so here's the big question. How are you most likely to lose money?
Sorry, can I rephrase that question? How do you avoid losing money? When anybody says to me, and I meet a lot of people who ask me, I'm thinking of buying a vineyard. And I say, have you thought of buying a yacht or a horse? And they go, sorry, what do you mean? I'm going to buy a vineyard. So if you bought a yacht, you would know that it was a toy. And you know that you're going to lose money on it, most likely, but you'll have fun. But a friend of mine, a great guy, Peter Sichel, who died a few years ago, ex-CIA, all sorts of stuff, he and his partners own Chateau Fourcasse-Hosten in Listrac, one of the appellations in Bordeaux, where I certainly wouldn't want to own anything. And he said, quite openly, he said, the 2 happiest days of my life were the day we bought it and the day we sold it. And actually, the second of those was the happier one because it took a long time. So how do you avoid losing money? Number 1, understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Is this a hobby? Is this something you're passing on to your kids and your grandchildren, or is it something that you actually want to see as a return? Nobody talks in the wine industry. We talk about AOP, DOC, QMP, all these. When I'm teaching students, I say, so ROI, it doesn't, return on investment is not part of the picture. So number 1, what are you looking for? Do you want to get your money back quickly? If you're into private equity, you've got 7 to 10 years. You want to turn this business round, and you can do it very often through improving distribution, hopefully not cutting costs, but hopefully not cutting quality, but you may be able to do that. But if you're starting a brand from nothing, you're saying, right, how much money am I going to put in? So this is relevant. Marketing, the wine industry spends, in theory, officially between 5 and 7% on marketing. Those figures tend to come from the US. In Europe, it's about 3%. And that includes going to trade fairs and so on. So we're spending nothing on telling people to buy our wine. Spirits, 20%. Champagnes, 20%. One of the models here, if you're starting a new wine, you should be saying, I'm going to spend 20% on selling this, on telling people in the first year or two. Then we'll come down to ideally 10, where that puts us way outside the mainstream. So Whispering Angel is a great brand. A lot of effort went into getting people to buy Whispering Angel, and hey presto, LVMH has bought into it. But most of us don't have that much money, or don't want to spend it, or our neighbors aren't spending it. And one of our big problems is we're selling too much wine through supermarkets who push our price down. Now, if we're talking, if we've got somebody who's got some money and wants to produce something super premium, then I'd be looking at direct to consumer, because everybody wants to sell direct to consumer. So we're going to have to be a bit cleverer than the next guy. Because very crucially, this is a zero-sum game today. Maybe 10 years ago, we were looking for new wine drinkers, and we would be the first wine they bought. And China, India, all these places. Today, if I sell one bottle of Cab Chéri or Le Grand Noir, unfortunately, somebody else is probably not selling a bottle. It's like playing tennis. If you score a point, the other person has not. So essentially, we've got to understand that. And we also have to understand the inflexible shelf. It's the same thing. So I make lovely wine. The person I want to sell, girl I want to sell it to, can sell 200 wines in their store, or 300 wines in a wine list, or whatever it is. If they take my wine, that's number 301. They don't have space for 301. So I have got to go in and to persuade them why my wine is necessary for them to sell. And then they have got to persuade their customer to buy my wine.
I would like to turn to your passion project, this wine from Georgia, because it's made from a bunch of grapes that I can't pronounce, but it's from a country that's got one of our deepest, most ancient wine culture, hundreds of grape varieties, indigenous grape varieties.
510.
510. That's extraordinary.
I'll come back to that.
Yeah, the different terroirs. But just explain to me how you ended up in Georgia. Tell us the story of this wine.
But can I go back to the beginning of your question, which is this is my passion project. One of the first things I say when I'm talking to clients or possible clients or whatever, when people talk about passion, I start to say, let's take this out of the equation. The world is full of people who are passionate about writing poetry or books or painting paintings, and most of them do it really badly. And there are, I hate to say it, but there's some really good winemakers.
Oh, this is a really good wine.
No, thank you. But my point about it is passion. It's great to have it. But there are a lot of people out there who just do a great job, and they're not necessarily that passionate.
You've got to have your feet on the ground, and this is a business. This is a business.
So how did this? It's a nice story. I was doing some consultancy for the country of Georgia, the national wine agency, and that meant I was hanging around their wine fairs and so on. Right. And I knew a lot of the winemakers, and I happened to be standing next to this young guy, Vladimir Koplashvili. And he's showing me some of the wines, and he gave me a wine I hadn't had before, and it's called Aladasturi, and I'd never heard of it. And I said, wow, this is good. This is really good. And it's a bit like saying, hey, your kid can play the piano. And what you normally say, well, thank you, that's nice. He didn't. He said, well, it's difficult. It's a bit like, my kid can play the piano, but he's really not easy to get on with. Really, what do you mean? He said, well, it's a late ripening grape in a damp region. So we get problems with rot, and it's a real headache. That doesn't sound easy. So I said, okay, and why are you telling me this? He said, well, what I do is we pick the grapes at around 10.5% alcohol, and we hang them in an open-sided barn for 10, 11, 12 days until they get to about 12%. And they're shielded from the bad weather. And then we put them in the amphora, the Fevri, and we ferment them. I said, that's really good. Is that traditional? He said, no. And I said, well, how come you're doing it? He said, well, I've been to Italy and I've seen what they do there. We're not doing what they do in Italy, because in Italy you want them to shrivel and become like raisins. His don't. And I thought, you are my kind of person, because I love chefs and I love mixologists. And I get frustrated with wine people who go, I'm going to make a Cabernet Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot blend. Why? Did Moses come down the mountain saying, God gave French the winemaking? Let's say we're going to do a co-ferment. We don't do co-ferment, but we're going to do a co-ferment. What's a co-ferment? Co-ferment, black and white grapes. Well, that has to be Syrah Viognier. Why? Which God said, Viognier grapes, Syrah grapes. I remember the great Peter Lehman, producer in Australia, said he'd made a Muscadel Syrah blend, co-ferment. Worked brilliantly. There's lots of co-ferments that work. So to me, having somebody who understands that the rules aren't rules, that don't need. So that was where I came from. Here, somebody who really got it and was up for a challenge of doing something new. Secondly, I'd been going to Georgia. I was fascinated by these grapes. But Al-Asturi, there's 38 hectares, like, what's that, 90 acres, 100 acres or whatever, in the world. It's all in Georgia. So we're working with tiny little fraction.
So these are rare grapes, some of them.
Rare grapes that people, so Georgia says it has 510, 525 grapes.
Yes.
They use about 12 of them.
Oh.
Italy uses more different grapes because it's quite hard. Now, the thing is, the Georgians, I don't think for a very good reason, tend to sell the wine generically by grape variety. So you can go and get a Roccazzatelli or a Mutzvane or Solicori or whatever. Unpronounceable for most of us. And I'm not sure that they're necessarily best on their own. Why are we doing that? Well, because we do Cabernet Sauvignon, we do Chardonnay. But of course, in the West, in Australia, California, whatever, your Cabernet Sauvignon may not be 100%. It's going to be a blend, a bit like my Chardonnay Viognier. In Georgia, my Solicori tends to be 100% Solicori, not mine, but the ones that they're doing. Blending, to me, actually can improve those wines. So, and the last thing to say about this project, which was one of the magic things, was that Vladimir Lado, there's the Georgian name, has been given the leeway by the owners. They are also Hugo Boss in Georgia. They have hotels. They have an apple farm. They've let him play. And so one of the ways in which they let him play is we actually store wine. So in this wine here, this is the 2023 assemblage, not a vintage, multi-vintage. 10% of that is wine from 2017. What are you doing?
So like a champagne. You're talking
also, yeah, that's what everyone says. And everyone says, no one says Vega Sicilia.
Okay.
Vega Sicilia, pretty famous, pretty successful with a multi-vintage blend. Why doesn't everybody else do it? Yeah. Oh, well, no, people want a vintage. Do they? Why? They pay a lot of money for Vega Sicilia. Why do I do a multi-vintage? We have something called climate change.
Yeah.
One year here, we actually had one of our grapes, the one Georgian grape whose name really works is Kisi, Kisi. Lovely grape. There's not that much of it, a couple of thousand hectares probably. In 1 year, my partners lost 200 hectares of it through hailstorms, 5 hailstorms. We could not have put it into the blend that year if we'd wanted to, but we had some from the previous year and the year before. So this was, and what I would say is I've been writing about wine for a long time. And when I was a critic, I'm not really proud to say this. I would actually say to people when they give me their wine, I'd say, well, I really like this, but have you thought about blending it better? It's like, have you thought about changing the clothes you wear? Well, it's rude, to be honest, but I used to do it. I couldn't help doing it. And sometimes I'd go back and they'd say, hey, last time you came, you said do this. And well, we're doing it. And I'll help. Have I made you do something that's going to make you go bankrupt? I don't know. But basically, I've always been fascinated with the concept of wines. My brand is being the wine thinker. And what these wines are, immodestly or honestly or whatever, they are 3-dimensional embodiments, iterations of ideas I have had. If they work, that's great. And if they fail, and some of them will have failed and will fail, then that's part of the process of being in the business. But in wine, we have this idea that there's a model, follow that model, and you'll be okay. Sadly, in this industry where we are in Bordeaux, there used to be 20,000 individual estates. These days, I think there's between 4,000 and 5,000. Do we need 4,000 to 5,000 people in one region making the same styles of wine? We don't. So essentially, we're going to end up with 1,000 or 1,500. And as we're speaking today, a Bordeaux chateau will disappear, and another one tomorrow and one yesterday. So it's not easy. And people like me are coming along and creating new wines. So we're making it worse.
Well, okay, no, yes and no. My George has produced wine for
8,000 years.
Exactly. So you're bringing them to the world. I'm just wondering, okay, so this is a blending there's different ferments, right? There's different grape varieties from different regions, different altitudes, different soil, and different aging, right? Because some are in the amphora in the ground.
So let me explain the thing. So when you say to people, Georgian wine, oh, that's all those amphora, those Fevries, and I say, yeah, that's 5% of commercial Georgian wine.
But you put a little bit into your wine.
We do. We put, actually, there's roughly 10% in that bottle, and we do some skin ferment in stainless steel. So there's about 15% of it. Why isn't it 100%? And I love some of those wines, and my partner makes a lot of those wines. Because I don't think most people who are coming new to Georgian wine actually want that, like it, or it may be a one-off experience. Right. I want it to be there sufficiently for it to be part of the picture,
for the identity,
but not essentially to be the thing.
So would it work potentially for there be the creation of a Georgian white blend, a red blend? Would that be a shorthand for a consumer? So you don't have to list on the back label, you'd list all of the grape varieties, but not on the front. Could you say that? I mean, would that be a way to reach Western consumers?
It's growing now, but I've done some work for Moldova, the country of Moldova, which is the poorest country in Europe, and they can make really nice wines. And who knows about them? Who's heard about them? And everything that we were talking about them is blending. They create
Moldovan red blend
and make really good blends. The thing about being a blend, what I like about being a blend, is you own it. Yeah. If I'm Chablis, if I'm a Chablis and I'm a Chardonnay, I am just one of that range. So we talk about what is a brand. And I think it's important to talk about that. As far as I'm concerned, you can say a brand. I think Bezos said a brand is what people say about you when you're not there, which I quite like as an idea. And other people talk about it. It's part of the real estate of somebody's brain. But to me, if you're a brand, you're not a commodity. Go and buy some apples from the store. They're apples. Pay a bit extra for pink lady apples, and the grower is selling his apples because they've got pink lady on them, and there's a budget to promote pink lady. And that to me is being a brand. What I do, whether it's writing books or it's consultancy or whatever, I have to be a bit of a brand. You're a brand. Jane Anson is a brand. And so essentially we need to understand that, and then also understand what that brand represents and to whom. Well, so for our entrepreneurs who are out there, is this a good time to get into business? What are your thoughts on that? What are the headwinds? What are the opportunities? Well, firstly, you want to be at the top end or the bottom end of this market. You don't want to be in the middle. So being the best part of wine to buy as a consumer is where the value is in the middle. Let's say above $20 and going up to maybe 50 or whatever. But essentially you want to be above or below. There are always going to be enough rich people to buy the top end if you can actually brand it right. It may not be as $200 for Napa Cabernet may be too much, but there'll be people who buy the top end. And if you can get the bottom end right, then you can be there. But the bottom end is really tough. Is it a good time to get in? Well, land prices are going down. People are drinking less. We have a lot of things heading in our direction at the moment, which I'll do very quickly. We have climate change, which makes it very difficult to do it. We have politics. We have tariffs and so on. We have people drinking less wine for various reasons. And one of those reasons is, and people talk about this a lot, World Health Organization, fear of cancer. And then the other thing is young people aren't drinking wine, Gen Z. I don't think the Gen Z people are not drinking wine because they're scared of getting cancer when they're 60. I think there are other reasons. And one of those is actually this. The smartwatch. The smartwatch will tell you didn't sleep well last night. And you will know that you didn't sleep well last night because you had a few drinks. So there's a whole lot of people, and not just those young people at various ages, who have now given up drinking basically Sunday through Thursday.
Okay.
That's relevant because we're expecting people to do a lot of wine drinking on the last bit of the week. Then we've got this other thing, which is the weight loss drugs. GLP-1s, and there is definite proof through research that this takes away people's taste for alcohol. It also very often may actually make them obviously eat less, because that's part of it, which may mean they go to restaurants less.
Right.
If they do that, where are they drinking the wine? So these are reasons for not getting into this business today. On the other hand, everybody says, get in at the bottom of the market. And I don't think we've hit the bottom of the market. I think we're going to see those weight loss drugs having more impact over the next year or so. I think if I were getting into this business, I would wait a year or two. But I think, yes, there is going to be a market. I've done it. I'm investing in the wines. I'm looking at a new project or two. But A, you're not going to get your money back tomorrow. It's a long play. And B, you need to understand exactly where you're going to be in this market, and to really get that right, and be prepared. And this is also relevant. Be prepared to pivot. So I talked to Stephanie Gallo, and she says, Gallo, and they have a lot of brands, they say, we know who each wine is for. We do a lot of research. We do it in one state. We do various things. And sometimes we get it wrong. And she said, I think she told me there was one wine that we thought was going to be for soccer moms. And we found it wasn't. It worked. It played really well with the gay market. Now, what do? Do we actually think, we've got to work harder to get the soccer moms to buy the wine we thought was for them? Or do we say, hey, these people love our wine. Let's give them the wine they love.
Exactly.
So that, as far as I'm concerned, we are in the entertainment business. And I think the moment you understand that, you understand that you make a lot of movies and they don't all fly. You print a lot of books and they don't all fly. You work on the ones that do. But secondly, it's experiential. We need to give people an experience. And if we do that, if we can create a relationship of some kind with the consumer, which is what actors do, which is what filmmakers do, what writers do, then I think we can actually make a brand and make it work. But it's a big ask. The good thing to say, though, anybody out there who wants to get into this business, so many people in this business are not interested in doing that. They're just interested in making lovely wine for themselves and their friends. And they're easy to compete with. Okay.
That's an interesting thought to leave them with. You have an upcoming book.
I do. So this is something that actually, I've got 3 upcoming books.
Oh, you do?
Well, no, I haven't done a book. I have to say, I've done 25 books, none of them, not one book since 2002, I think, 2003. And all of those books were classic wine books, regions, whatever. So since then, I've not been a wine critic. I've stopped doing that stuff. So now 3 books, first of which is this one called Wine Thinking, which is a collection of stuff I've been writing for the last 20 years. But it's not just a collection. It's about what we've got wrong as an industry and how we should be getting it right. So it's broken down into different topics like that. Secondly, there's a book called The Wine People. And that is, I hope it's a fun book. It's about 200 different they're imaginary people, but they're people, there's images of them, we create out of AI, but they're the people who make the wine, the people who sell the wine, and the people who drink the wine, and all these different people. And then lastly, I'm working with a partner on a book which is called Beyond Alcohol, which is looking at where we are going, both with wine and other drinks, and with the alternatives. So in other words, what we've seen fruit flavored, we've seen bourbon barrel wines and so on. That's one strand, and some light zero alcohol, mid strength. And that's a whole new thing that we're not talking about very much. 6%, 7, 8, 9%. A lot of people getting into that. I think I'm going to get into that. And then we've got these high strength. We're told that everybody wants lighter, fresher. Something called XXL in the States, 16% alcohol. So muscat, flavor with fruit, essentially fortified. It's a huge success. So I'm interested in those. Whether I want to make them or not is another question. But I'm also interested in what we're calling the proxies, the alternatives. And those include something that, again, I'm looking at we're working to produce in Georgia, which is sparkling tea.
Oh, fantastic.
And why do we need all these zero alcohol wines and products? I'll tell you, there's a guy called Mark Elmert, who was the Mayor Sommelier du Monde before last. And I did a public event with him in Paris, in which he was talking about zero alcohol wine. And he said, he's a lovely guy. He said, people ask me, why am I doing this? He said, I'll tell you, I have to generate a certain amount of revenue every week for the owners of the restaurant where I work. And at lunchtime, I'm serving water. If I can give my customers something to drink that gives them pleasure, that goes with the food, and that we make money on, that makes my bosses happy and it makes the customers happy. So that's what I'm interested in looking at. Where are we going? I think for the last, we've had a bump in the road, big bump in the road, when New World wines and varietals came along. An inflection point, if you like, in the 70s and 80s. I think we're at an inflection point today where the wine industry, and indeed the rest of the alcohol industry, is going through some big changes. And so for as long as I'm around, I want to try and record those. And whether it's writing about them or helping through consultancy or whatever people negotiate it, this is the most exciting time in many ways to be in this industry. But it's like sailing. You're sailing through some pretty choppy water.
So when is the book coming out?
This will be 3 months. Wine Thinking. It's basically going through some final editing now. And the wine people, just in basically September, I think. And I'm aiming for Beyond Alcohol to be September as well. So 3 books this year.
3 books, all at essentially the same time.
Yeah, but having said that, nobody's that surprised. We put out a red, white, and rosé at the same time. Here in Georgia, we had a year in between each. But secondly, they've been gestating for a long time. So essentially, Wine Thinking is bringing together a lot of stuff I've been thinking for a long time. But now I think is a good time to do it. I'm enjoying the conversations with people like you, with other people. Today, the world of wine is divided between the people who are thinking about it, is obviously my clan, and the people who are thinking, oh, yeah, well, I just do. And there's this cyclical thing. And I just say briefly, the people who say, we've been through bad times before in wine, it's all going to be okay. So many of those people are the same people when I talk about climate change. So, the climate's changed a lot in the past and so on. And I honestly, they're very nice people, a lot of them, and I'm really happy, but that's not the best conversation as far as I'm concerned.
No. Well, listen, Robert, it's always fascinating to talk to you. You really are the wine thinker. You're given a lot to think about. It's really interesting, all the projects you've got going. Thank you for joining us. We'll be sure to look at your books.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've loved this. Thank you so much. And I love what you and Jane are doing. And I'm sorry if we've overrun on time, but look at what we have.
Yeah, no, it's really, you're going to give our audience a lot to think about. I think between looking at the market, how you actually create a wine, the nitty gritty of it, the places it takes you in the world, the people you meet, the things to think about.
Vietnam is a great market. Basically, I struggle to sell my wine in Germany and in Britain, and I'm selling wine in Vietnam.
Fantastic.
And selling wine in Africa. This is fun.
Yeah. Somebody asked me what I liked about the wine business. I said the people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the adventure of it.
And do you know anything about Ghana? Funerals. Basically,
are they serving Le Grand Noir?
Apparently, a Ghanaian funeral is a bit like in Ireland.
Okay. Goes on for
everybody can come.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of booze.
Yeah.
So, but just quickly, lightweight bottles, not working in Africa. Everyone says we've got to do this, etc. Yeah, but if you want to sell wine, you've got to think very, very hard about what you want to sell. What do they want to buy?
Well, again, lots and lots to think about. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you for joining us for that fascinating conversation with the always interesting Robert Joseph. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you'll check out the rest of our episodes. Our show is produced in partnership with Wine Voices, powered by Wine Searcher, the world's largest wine and spirits database. And we can give you a 10% discount on their annual Wine Searcher Pro subscription. Just put in the code JNWS at the checkout and follow the link in the description.